So sometimes this idea of the family physician, the internist who knows you, who's known your family, who's taken care of you for years and years, it sounds like a sort of 1950s idea.
It is. Dr. Kildare is dead, and as a matter of fact, he made the mistake of taking a role in All Quiet on the Western Front and you remember Lou Ayres, and was killed in the last scene. The fact of the matter, though, is that although it is a migratory population, it's not a permanently migratory population. By and large, once the move is made that brings one to one's occupation when one is married and has a child, is the move that is either final or semi-final. In other words, people live for 10 or 15 years in an area, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if I polled this group that most of us, most of you, most of us, had been living in the area in which you're living for at least 10 years. That's a good long time to become acquainted with a physician.
Well, and perhaps that residential stability is greatest at the end of life. That
absolutely.
Amongst 35-year-olds, you'll find a lot of folks who've lived in 4 or 5 different places in the previous 15 years. But amongst 75-year-olds, a greater percentage of them have been in the same place for 10 or 15 years.
Incidentally, I want to answer a question you haven't asked. And I was talking to somebody out in the corridor. Where is he? Well, I guess he heard everything I had to say, and so he didn't have to be here. What I was saying was that there is a certain assumption that I think we have been making in the last 2 days that is erroneous. We are talking about our discussions, our time with people at the end of life. We are asking them what is meaningful to them. We are asking them things about families in an attempt to interpret what they mean and to know what their wishes truly are. The trouble is, at least in the experience of a clinician, the people that I see at the end of life are not the same vibrant people that I knew at the beginning of their illness. In a hospital situation, most patients are in some way sedated or in some way taking medications that have an influence on their thinking processes, on their cognition, on their ability to process information. So, and even if it isn't the drugs, the analogy that I was making in this conversation out there is people don't die, well, some do with a massive coronary or a stroke. People die equivalently to a man coming along and turning out 30 light, there you are, 30 light switches, one at a time. Here, I'm looking everywhere, and you're standing right there. And he's turning out one light switch after another. And as we, as caregivers at the end of life, or chaplains or whatever, come along, some of those light switches have been turned off. And so what you are dealing with is not the same understandings, meanings, and interpretations that existed in this healthy person. The classic example, and this is really an oversimplification, I mentioned last night that 1/4 of people have written advance directives. How many times in a long career, 1992, have I seen people change their minds about advance directives when they are home and in their lawyers' offices and clear about the kinds of people they really are and their relationship to people, they know exactly what they want. When they are sedated or sick and 6 of the lights have gone out, they may feel very, very differently about it. So we have to take into consideration, this is a terrible expression, that dying people are not dealing from a full deck. They can't be.
So some of this surely is related to cognitive impairment.
Absolutely.
But isn't it also...
Judgment?
Well, the chat with death, the conversation with God, as we call it sometimes. I mean, the comfort of my living room or chatting with my physician when I'm basically feeling well, filling out an interesting form he's asked me to tell him about. And then shortly after the doctors told me, I'm sorry, it's everywhere, there's not much we can do for you. I mean, it's not just turning off the lights. You just put on a Klieg light on my soul. And
Precisely.
I'm going to answer this question in a different way, maybe.
I think that the notion of a Klieg light is perfect because we've all seen animals stunned by a sudden light. We talk of the term deer in the headlights. Where I live, deer are always walking across the main highway, the Merritt Parkway, and you see it again and again. Here's a deer standing on the white line, and he's looking at you, and he just can't move, and you've got to work around him. Just the knowledge, even if it's not truly accepted emotionally, just the knowledge that you've heard those words, if you're not fighting it with tremendous denial, that itself will change your responses. Yeah.
So you don't necessarily put a higher value on the decision made in the comfort of my living room over the decision made a day or two after I've been told I have widely metastatic cancer.
Can I quote Shelley? Since I quoted Plato, I get to quote Shelley. Maybe I can convince you that I'm really a smart guy. That's why I'm quoting Shelley. Shelley, when he was 27 years old, two years before he drowned in that boat accident on Lake Como, wrote an essay, wrote several wonderful essays, but this particular one is called A Defense of Poetry. And he invented a concept, a notion in this essay that he refers to as moral imagination. And how he defines moral imagination is the ability to see the world through the eyes of others. This isn't the same as empathy. Empathy, where you are feeling what the other person feels. This is the ability to see the world through the eyes of others. And as caregivers, whether we're doctors or whether we're certified nurses' assistants or even the woman who comes in, and it's almost always a woman, to give the daily bath to the homebound person who is dying. My sense is that we must see ourselves through the eyes of the person who is dying at the time he or she is dying. And in that way, divine what their expectations of us are, which may be very different expectations than they might have been when that person was perfectly clear, perfectly rational at home.
Divine through dialogue.
Divine through looking into the eyes of the sick, studying every signal they provide for you, every word they provide for you, and think about the context in which the entire relationship is carried on, and provide for them what they feel they need at that time. And you know, every once in a while you have to tell a lie. And I have lied to dying people. I'm a man raised in an Orthodox Jewish home who is now, and has been for many, many years, an agnostic. I'm married to a woman of deep faith, but I myself am an agnostic. And when I have been asked, as I have more than once, do you think, doctor, that I will, some term for heaven, that there will be an afterlife for me, which I don't believe in, I will reassure such people that for them there is an afterlife. That's a lie. There are some people who are in such an extraordinary state of denial that it can't be changed. Early in the course of treatment of a malignancy, for example, it's important that you break through that denial. You do it gently, you do it slowly. When it still exists, or you come into contact with this patient near the end of life and you recognize the denial is so great that it is reassuring, I think you have to go along with the denial. Yeah.
And I would call that respect.
There you go. It's respect. And someone was talking, again, I'll refer to it once more, about autonomy being essentially a community thing, even if it's just between 2 or 3 people. autonomy is respect, really, for what that person is. Yeah.
Shep, before we end, I want to see if there are questions from the audience
Sure.
for us. Please, Tom.
Tom? Yeah.
Well, I'd like to go back to the beginning in talking about the young physicians and how all this certainty they come to gradually. In my time, I've been as critical of the medical profession as anyone I know. But I want to put a little defense in here in that it's not specific to physicians. It's part of the role of the healer. Any naturopath is as certain what she's doing as the chiropractor is, as the psychic surgeon in the Philippines is, as the physician. It's part of the ethos of medicine. If you can imagine a physician saying to a patient, well, there's an 80% chance you have appendicitis, and I'm going to operate, and if it's not, we'll look for something else. No. Have to be absolutely certain. And that is handed down. This part of the ethos of medicine is the chief resident to the resident to the, well, we don't have interns anymore, but to the students. That's where they learn it. And I'm all for these courses that are developing, but I fear that until we really change the ethos of medicine, it'll just continue.
Yeah, but you know, Tom, I would argue that medicine is different in this sense. Being a practitioner of medicine, you are required to blend your uncertainty into your diagnosis. You must take action on your own uncertainty. You must understand in your own mind. You don't have to share it necessarily with the patient that this diagnosis is uncertain, but with the entire series of logical ways I've thought about this and my judgment, I think I should operate. And you might say to the patient, yes, statistically you have an 80% probability. You might even be very boastful and say, I'm the best surgeon in the place and I've got a 92% rate of that, whatever you want to do. But you don't share your qualms at a time like this, but you put your qualms into the whole pot, into the whole crucible of the actions you choose to take. Yes, you should, right, exactly.
I mentioned, hi.
Oh, hi.
I mentioned something to you earlier this afternoon about an encounter I had with CEOs of major healthcare centers, sponsored by the Lutheran Church, and my topic was to talk about interdependence. And the pushback I got was massive. There's a wonderful saying from Zimbabwe, I am well if you are well. And one of the things I've been thinking about as I've listened to this wonderful conversation go on is that maybe beyond coming to terms with finitude, which is on one side a very important thing for us to do, which is about boundaries and being clear about boundaries, we need to talk also about the human condition of interdependence and of community, and how we need one another and how we are bound to one another. And I don't know the formula for that, but it seems to me that in part the struggle that we face with the medical system and the healthcare service system in general is that it is built on the basis of American individualism. And so it's so deep in our culture that the kind of transformation that needs to take place needs to come at it from all kinds of different ways, but that one of the ways is to think about, I am well if you are well. If we could say that 10 times a day, imagine it. And I'm doing something in Portland in October, and I gave them the title, and they turned it around. You are well if I'm well. Well, that's American individualism right there.
Well, there's
But-
also the other version of that, which is, if you don't look good, I don't look good.
That's right.